Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2, testing, testing. We should be live. Please let me know if you can hear me in the chat. Let me know how the sound is. Get some water. I know it's late. We're going to keep this one pretty short, but there isn't really a super specific topic. I'm missing a button. But you guys don't get that kind of show here. But I have some important updates that I want to discuss, and so we'll wait till more people get on the stream, and then I'll state them, or I'll state them multiple times. We'll see. But it is an Ask Me Anything as well, so anything that you would like to know in the chat, I will answer it if I want to answer it. I usually answer most things, but please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. And comment your comments in the comment section below and ask your live questions in the chat. So, first of all, updates. Last week's stream, even though it was so impromptu, and that's the right word, it was, and also I feel like pretty casual, and also pretty late, it did go kind of viral a bit for this channel at least, and got over 10,000 views. So that's pretty cool, I guess. I wish it would. I had a more coherent stream for it to have 10,000 views on, but you don't get to pick them. You guys do. So or the algorithm. I mean, the algorithm doesn't make any choices, but still, God does, I guess. Not even I guess, but still. That's we'll talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about sovereignty a little bit. During the times that there isn't an AMA question, but I'm not doing this for the views, but it was interesting to see a video get views that quickly. I saw that there's tons of comments. I've not been able to read them yet on that video, but I will go through them. There's a lot, but I probably can still read most of them, so I will try and respond. That said, like I said, please hit the like button, comment down below, and share this if you like this channel. Subscribe if you haven't yet. But as far as other important updates, and this is the big one, I am moving to a new place to live. I will share more updates and more specifics about it after it's done, but I am moving next week, so it's very soon. I will not be able to do a stream next week, but it's not out of laziness. It hopefully the new location, we can even turn things up even more so with the production quality and things like that, and I can get back to a lot of the projects that I did have planned for this year, which was a lot. I wanted to do some interviews with some key people, still have that planned. That is a short list, but it's a good list, so I think that would be great. I'm still planning on doing that. I am also still going to be releasing a paper this year and a lot more produced content, but this move that I have not been able to talk about until now has been really requiring a lot of attention and time. And so next week we're actually doing the physical move. We now have a place to move, and so and just every other life situation's basically sorted out going forward. So I will update everybody on that after it's complete, more specifically. But we will have a new studio, and unfortunately this green bench is going to probably have to go, but I will be replacing it with something else cool, hopefully. But once we're done moving, definitely would like some feedback, input feedback on a new studio. If you have any feedback on the current one and have any suggestions for upgrades, lighting, whatever, let me know in the chat below. But I'm excited, and this is another step in life, and we'll talk a bit about choice tonight. What is sovereignty? What is choice? Because it was very relevant to this situation, that this moving situation, and it's relevant to a lot of moving situations, not all of them, but it's very relevant to certain key decisions in our lives. Is what is that we understand what is sovereignty and what is choice. And so with that, we will talk about it. I guess Tucson randomly. No, it's not Tucson. I am from Tucson, but I'm not moving to Tucson. Nothing wrong with Tucson. I love Tucson. Beautiful wildlife and wilderness and things like that. But Torin, by the way, message me on Discord. I have something to discuss with you. But I haven't seen you on there in a while, but I do have something specific to tell you. But with that, let's talk about sovereignty a bit. So one of the things, there have been a couple instances in my life where, let's back up. Let's get to free will. I remember that there was this clip, and I think it wasn't just on Kurchai Mungel's interview of Eric Weinstein, which has way too little views. Definitely check that out. It's old, but it's very good, and I can't believe it didn't get more views than it did, at least last time I checked a couple years ago. Kind of flew. It was like an Eric Weinstein interview that flew under the radar, and Eric is asked about free will at some point, and he's just talks about how it's such a time waste. And he's mentioned this on many different interviews. He gets asked it many times. Every person who is a public philosopher, I guess you could say, gets asked about free will all the time, and it is an endless conversation that is usually not worth it, and I would agree with that. But it's because we aren't defining the terms first. So first, before you ask, do we have free will? You can't even ask that before you define what free will would be. So I asked this years ago when I was thinking about us being in, a simulation. This was many years ago. And I was asking, am I real? Are the people around me real? What is choice? Are we, if we have instincts, do we actually have choice? What would choice even be if instincts would negate choice? And so I made quite a bit of progress on it, though, I feel like. But it's actually quite simple, though, that free will is just the ability to make choices that are true choices. So what is a true choice? A true choice is when you have a nature and you have to choose to go against that nature or to go along with that nature, but you are aware of that nature and you can choose to act in accordance with it or against it. So you have a trajectory, a logic, a nature, a direction that is the natural flow, and you can choose to go against it or with it. You can choose to swim up the stream, or you can choose to swim, with the stream and use that that momentum, that natural momentum, to fuel a goal that you actually have and have chosen. Or you can swim against your instincts, essentially, swim against the logic of the system that you're in, the incentives, all these things that are motivating or influencing a decision, but are still not forcing an exact choice. And so this requires, in order to do this, though, it requires a very specific perspective. And it's a very specific level of awareness that you must have. You must be aware of the choice. If you come to a fork in the road and there are two choices, you can go this way or you can go this way, then if you don't see where the paths are going, you don't see that one is going to the mountains and one is going to the ocean, or you don't know for some reason that one leads to the mountains and one leads to the ocean, you can't actually make a choice. If it just looks like they head off into, wilderness and they look exactly the same, basically, you cannot make a choice, actually. You cannot make a choice. There's no choice to be made. You could say, oh, well, I choose left or right, but you're not actually choosing to go that direction or that direction. You're making like a meta choice, which is like a choice within the constraints of this other choice that you would like to be able to make, but you can't. So if you said, okay, well, I'm going to flip a coin and I'm going to go heads, I go right, tails, I go left. The choice is to flip the coin and to follow where it goes, not to decide to go that direction or that direction. It's to flip the coin and let the coin decide, essentially. Decide. I don't want to say a non-sentient thing can decide. But, and again, I do apologize for the late hour. Like I said, we're moving, so it's been a bit just busy. But I will slow down, once we're done, and that will be in the next couple weeks. So, so you have to be aware of the choice being there, which means that in certain circumstances involving humans, where we have this instinct, and we also have this that's built into us, but we also have this ability to think beyond the current circumstances. We have the ability to make a choice, and that is a free will choice. Now, animals, I believe, can make free will choices, but they're just much more restricted in when and where they can make them. And I think that even lower levels of sentience, cells and molecules even, and atoms can also make free will choices. But there's a process going on in the universe called stacking, according to sentient singularity theory, where a stacking is where, like, you are a cluster of cells, but then also a human mind stacked on top of those cells that is composed of those cells. So as soon as something gets, as an assembly gets stacked, so an assembly of atoms gets stacked, and then you have a molecular mind on top of it, and you have an assembly of molecules, and a cellular mind gets stacked on top of that, and you have an assembly of cells, and an organism mind gets stacked on top of that. Then free will is still available to you, but it's generally much easier to know what is the right choice, because there is now a hierarchy in place that's objective. It's like, or super subjective, whatever term you want to use. It's an intrinsic hierarchy. My cells have to listen to me they should, for their own good, because as long as I'm doing the right thing. If I'm going to grab, I don't know, anything, a cup, all my cells have to take orders from the king, me, and go and grab the cup. And but so when there's this hierarchy in place, decisions become much more predictable. And when I first started this project, I was in this physics Discord that I've talked about many times, where it was very hostile, and one of many. And somebody had said to me, hadrons and atoms are not sentient. Nobody thinks that. And I was like, well, I think that. That's what my work suggests. And they were like, they don't make choices. And I was like, they do make choices. He was like, if they made choices, then nothing would be able to be predictable. And I was like, you can make choices and you're still predictable. And it's like, you can't argue with that. Human beings are predictable, especially on a macro scale, on a level of multiplicity and of an assembly. Groups of people are especially predictable. Much more so than an individual, because a group can't usually make a choice. There are certain structures that would allow for more, I guess, directedness, but I don't want to say choice, because it's still individuals making choices, and if the group makes a choice. But in the right setup, I would say it's almost could appear like the group makes a choice, but it's actually has to do with the incentives of the group, and how do you define who's in the group, who's out of the group, and also like who's heading the group. There's a lot of things that factor into it, but it's still just really an individual. It's like Tesla as a company looks like it could make a choice, and it's much more unpredictable of a company currently because Elon Musk is very much an individual person, and he does what he wants to do. Same thing with Apple when Steve Jobs was the CEO. Apple was much more directed and less, I guess, less predictable. But it was because Steve Jobs was less predictable. It wasn't because Apple was less predictable, really. It's just that Steve Jobs basically was Apple, just like Elon Musk basically is Tesla. As soon as Tim Cook took over for Steve Jobs after Steve Jobs passed, now Apple is super predictable. It goes along with every single trend of every single company, that every other company that's out there. It's not doing anything revolutionary, I don't think, and it's not doing anything unpredictable. It's not bad, they make good products, but most of the time. But that's not the point. Is that it's just it's a group of people, and so it's very apparent that Apple is much more predictable. But this also happens when there is a stacking that takes place where it's an intrinsic hierarchy. I am intrinsically higher on a hierarchy than my own selves. That's not the same as Steve Jobs over Apple, even though it kind of is because he's the CEO, but it's not because Tim Cook can't do it. It's because Steve Jobs was Apple, really. And just like Elon Musk is Tesla currently. But this, on a fundamental level in the cosmos, this takes place as well. Not that exactly like that, even more so than that, where I am a mind stacked on top of an assembly of minds, and that assembly is cells. Those are minds stacked on top of an assembly, and those assemblies are molecules. So, but this structure, of this hierarchical structure, that is fundamental, that I'm talking about, which is let's pull it up. Right here. You look at this. It's periodicity. This is the objective or super subjective or fundamental, probably best to just call it fundamental assembly structure, essentially. It's just this. This is a better way of just explaining it. Hadron maneuvers in space via individuals. An atom maneuvers in time via lineage. A quark is not a sentient being, but everything here eventually is technically a sentient being. It's just some of them are on the lineage level, like a family, and some of them are on the individual organism level, or individual level, like an organism. A cell is a lineage level, and molecule maneuvers in space via individuals. This seems like, cell would be individuals, but when you look at the replicative, this is a single replicative structure. A cell divides and makes more, and that's just how it happens, except for certain cells, like sperm and egg, but everything else. And but this is not the replicative level of an organism, for the most part. Not all organisms, but many. It's this one. And a family could be made up of one if it's like a parthenogenic species that reproduces asexually or something like that. There's kind of a blurred line between this. But for us, the family structure, because that doesn't ever make it beyond this, really, that type of being. This one, a being that maneuvers and has sexual reproduction makes it to this level. And especially if they pair bond, I would say for sure. This is still a work in progress, so just remember that. There are certain small questions that I still have that most people wouldn't even ask if they saw this yet, but I'm working on them. But this assembly of uh, of sovereignty of sentient beings is governed by the four primary perspectives. So how do you define what is, part of you versus what is not, who is separate from you, or who you're separate from, is by inside, outside, separate, and oneness. These four primary perspectives that are the base of my work, Sentient Singularity Theory. Inside means separate and oneness, outside means separate from oneness, and these are also defined by the others. So they're all they're all defining of each other. So to perceive one is to perceive all. But your cells are inside of you. What does that mean? It means they're separate and one with you. Your fates are sealed. If you pass, your cells are done. And that means that you are really together, but you're also separate. Your cells can make choices to go against the natural hierarchy, and that is called cancer. And I'd love to have Michael Levin on this on the stream. I will be reaching out to him at some point later this year. He's one of the people that I'd like to talk to, because he discusses this, basically, that cancer is like a cell that's lost its way, or chosen to go the wrong way, potentially. But I feel like it's not aware. It wouldn't be aware of its fate if it was fully aware of the big picture. It probably would not choose to go metastatic. But you have to be aware of choice. But if you're aware of everything that you really need to be aware of regarding your choice, then you're much more likely to make a specific choice in a specific direction. And it's kind of odd, because if you're it also seems to be the case that if you think that you're aware of everything, then you're much more likely to make that's probably a better way of putting it. If you think you're aware of everything that you need to be aware of to make the choice, you're much more likely to make a predictable choice. Assuming that the person making the prediction about your choice knows what you know, and knows what you don't, essentially. Knows the limits of what you know. That's what I would say. And so, if they assume that you know more than you do, then they'll probably not be very good at predicting what choice you're going to make. So, there have been times in my life, though, and to get to this is, we are all one. We are all partitions of God, which is the sentient being that is existence itself. That is ever present and eternal, and is, just the self-referential existence, and which is God. And we are partitions of God. We are partitions of sentience, which is partitions of God. And so, this is the context that kind of it really helps you navigate free will. If you take this idea and let's just assume it for the sake of argument, even if you don't, and don't just take my word for it that this is true, but only if what I'm saying makes sense, should you believe it. But just for the sake of right now, this argument, if you don't believe that existence is sentient and that sentience is the fundamental nature of existence, then just assume for the sake of argument. That means that existence has a will. What is will? Will is the desire to do. Okay? The very first model that I made was this one. And I started this work many years ago. And it's just a decision tree of choice, basically. How does a sentient being go about observing its world and making decisions and things like that? It's an algorithm, essentially, but what is the thing that pushes the algorithm? it's essentially the algorithm of general intelligence, but you know, you need more than just this, you know, I guess, algorithm, decision tree, whatever, in order to have, in order for general intelligence, or not general intelligence, any intelligence to actually exist in a system. You need more than just this, but this is part of it. And the first step is will. And so I was like, you know, what is that motivates action? It's will. Okay, what is will? It's the desire to do that which is not being done. Or it's just, you could just say this. The desire to do. And this intrinsically does mean really this, but in a lot of cases, but I guess you could say the desire to do. But it's more than just the desire to do. It's the desire to do yourself, not to have things done, but to do. If that makes sense? You doing. And this is why I've said before on here that even if the logic of the cosmos, the structure of the cosmos appears, which it does to me, according to my work, to be very highly constrained, and so it appears like God only had one way to make a meaningful universe. It seems like he had, which means like he almost had no choice in how to make it. He had to choose to make it, because he had to choose to partition his natural oneness, which is his nature, because there's only one existence, because existence encompasses all that exists. Existence is intrinsically one, sentience, and therefore entirely self-referencing, and that oneness of sentience is the default. It is the initial condition of the cosmos. And it had to take a choice to choose to go the opposite direction and be like, you know what, I'm going to partition some of me and go against what is the nature of logic itself, which is the nature of God in many ways. And he has to choose to go against it. And so that was the first choice that was ever made, was God choosing to partition his oneness of sentience into multiplicity of sentience. He wanted to create sentient beings within himself. And because there's nothing outside of existence, because existence is all that exists, and non-existence doesn't exist fundamentally, all of us are within God. And that means we're under his authority, but also we have the ability to make choices, because sentient beings have the ability to make choices because they have the ability to feel their distinctiveness and perceive the distinctiveness of others, I guess you could say, or infer the distinctiveness of others, because they can perceive their own distinctiveness. And so this is the context of choice. It's not just a relativistic world with, different, choices of what are you going to eat when you open up the fridge. Without recognizing a hierarchy of some type or a nature of yourself of some type, it is impossible to truly make choices, I believe. And I have explained it like this before, is that free will, if you open the refrigerator and you're like, what am I going to eat? And you're like, I see a cupcake and I see bacon. And so I am going to eat the bacon because I am craving something savory. That's not a free will choice if you don't believe that you need to make a choice or have a choice present that you're thinking about. If you're just like, what am I in the mood for? It's not a choice. It's the illusion of choice, but it's not a choice. You're just a perceiver of of you going through a natural, kind of like an algorithm. You're playing an algorithm, and you put it on autopilot, and you're just sitting in the cockpit, but like it's on autopilot. And but if you are Jewish or Muslim or vegan potentially, and you believe that you shouldn't eat pork, you shouldn't eat bacon, even though you're craving it, or even if you're not, and so that's the reason that you choose to not eat the bacon, you're going to eat the cupcake or not eat anything, that is a free will choice. Or even believing that you could choose not to do that because there is a will that is separate from yours, and that you're going to you have to choose to go along with the will of another or yourself, essentially, or go along with an action that is against your will or for your will, but you're aware that the choice is there. If that makes any sense. It's kind of tough, because I'm thinking about this from the perspective of us relating to God, but also from this perspective of us relating to other human beings. And so, if you want something that someone else has, but it's theirs, and you're going to take it, you want to take it, but you value their opinion too, or potentially, or that it, or you feel that it matters enough to consider it, then you can make a free will choice also there, I believe, of taking what is not yours, or not taking what is not yours, or maybe returning something that you found that isn't yours to someone that you're aware that they are another sentient being with their own will and I guess goals, and you're deciding whether or not to follow your goals versus their goals. And but this also can occur in the case of a moral perspective that you have, or maybe even health. So like you're going to choose not to eat the cupcake or the bacon, you're going to go to the store and get an apple, because even though you're craving a cupcake topped with bacon, which I've seen that actually like a lot. They're putting bacon on everything these days, I feel like, which makes me feel like we shouldn't be eating it. But I'm not saying that's correct. I don't eat bacon anymore, but I used to, so I know it's good. But they put it on everything now, which is odd. It's like fetishized. But but if you want to be healthy and you want to make a healthy choice, but you are aware that you're craving a bacon, topped a cupcake, but you're going to go refuse and go to the store and get an apple. I don't know yet if that is a free will choice, because it might be that you're just being motivated by fear of death, in which case, like, is that really a choice in that point, or is that is it a true choice at that point? I don't know. But if you're a vegan and you're like this, I believe that eating meat is wrong and eating animals is wrong, which I'm not going to actually, attack. I'm not a vegan, but I understand. And we'll talk about later this year, the morality. There is an intrinsic morality associated with veganism, according to Sentient Singularity theory. That doesn't mean it's immoral to eat meat necessarily, but like I said, I think that you can eat meat in certain circumstances, but I do think that there are certain moral considerations that must be taken into account when you're eating like an animal versus a plant for the most part. So, but that's going to be a fascinating stream. I actually will probably talk to Michael Levin about that. Talk about that on the interview with Michael Levin if we do that, but because it's relevant. But yeah, so basically what I'm saying is you have to be aware that there's a choice, and in order to have a choice, and that's all that free will really is. It's like the ability to make a choice that's a true choice. That's a choice that you're aware that you're making the choice. You're not just like, oh, I'm craving Skittles over Snicker bar when you're at the cash register. at the grocery store or something. That's not a true choice. It's motivated by an algorithm, and but you can make a choice in that circumstance. But that's a true choice. But it's, if you're just going to choose based on your what you're craving is, that's not a true choice. And it's the illusion. So with that said, there are certain, the reason why I bring this up is because there are certain things in my life, choices that I've made that were true choices. One of them was, and there's many of them, but I'm just going to share a couple. One of them was who I was going to marry, because there were so many things to be taken into account with that decision, but especially for me and my wife, just because of I changed a lot in my theological beliefs. I was an atheist when we met, and but it also, getting married is twofold for men, especially today. If you're living in an Orthodox conservative community, like a Muslim community or Orthodox Jewish community, or like a Mennonite Orthodox Christian community, any community that believes and really follows and adheres to no sex before marriage, men are motivated by their instincts to get married ASAP. So is everybody. But if you are in a society where you can have sex before marriage, is the culture, and it's not so taboo, which it should be. It should. We'll talk about that another time. But and I say that as somebody who came from the secular perspective a while back, and am guilty of having sex before marriage. But it's still, ideal to wait. But you're obviously motivated to get married right away if you are living in a society where you're not going to have sex before marriage. It's like the most powerful motivator in the world, probably, especially for men at least. And then, but if you live in a world where that's not the case, it's against your nature to be like, I'm going to marry this one person, because your nature is like, there's a girl there, there's a girl there, there's a girl there, there's all these, beautiful women around you, but you have to make a choice, free will choice, to choose to commit in that circumstance. And or you can choose not to, but if you're aware that it's what is good versus is different from, or what you should do is different from what your nature is, or that your nature is different from what should be done, then you can choose to go along with your nature too, and it's still free will choice, but you have to be aware of the choice. But that is a true choice that a man has to make before they get married, if they're coming from the secular world, especially, or a non-Orthodox world, I guess. And this, a lot of men wait until they're like in their late 30s to get married. And I was 30, I think. But I still chose, like, I wasn't like having FOMO of not getting married to any severe degree. But eventually people are like, oh, well, it's just easier to get married, so I'm going to do that because I, want kids or something. That's not a free will choice at that point. But if you make it and you're like, no, I have a nature here, and I also know what's right here, and that there's a choice there that's different. Now I have to make the choice. Do I go with what's right, or do I, follow my instincts? And but you have to be aware there's a choice to be able to have the free will in that certain circumstance. And choice is very important, because what choice is, and well, let's back up before I get there, but we'll come back to choice being essential to sovereignty in a second. But but another choice that you have to make is you have to choose which person. This is something everybody has to do. This is, but especially men, I'm going to say as a man, I know what this perspective is like, is you have to choose someone. There's, by the way, and so does the woman as well. And, but I don't know what it's like to be a woman, so I can't tell you exactly. But there's always, somebody richer and I don't know, younger and more beautiful and funnier and smarter, and there's always that, because there's constantly people being born. So you have to make a choice. You can't just be like, I'm waiting for the best that I can, the best that's out there. By the way, this is nothing. My wife is amazing. Like, I am very blessed, just in case this was being taken the wrong way. But I'm just saying, there's this, you have to make a choice, and in this circumstance, of who you want to marry. Same thing goes with women. There's always going to be a richer man. There's always going to be a taller man. There's always going to be a stronger man. You got to make a choice, though, because if you're waiting for the strongest, richest, tallest man, then you're never going to get it, because there's always another one. And if you're waiting for the, smartest, most beautiful girl that's more than the person in front of you, even, like, you're never going to get that. It's because there isn't that. It's life is a continuous process, and there's constantly people being born, so you're never going to get that. You have to recognize that, okay, right now I have to make a choice. And so this is another moment in life where it's like very obvious that I had to make a true choice. And not only did I have to make a true choice in the circumstance, and I'm listing out these few because they're not just that it's a true choice, but it's also a choice that I asked God for guidance on and usually got almost no answer. Not the getting married thing. I feel like it was pretty obvious to me that getting married was the right thing. But when you ask, is this the person for me? And there are plenty of signs that it was, but I'm just saying that when I eventually did ask that question, I felt like I got silence, from God showing me. And then I realized, I was like, what this means is God, it's showing me something very important, though, which is that, and even more important, which is that this has to be my choice. And this recently happened to me with moving. We were so it was very difficult to make this decision of where we were going to move and if we were going to move, and I kept just going to God for being like, show me a reason to make one decision or another, and it never happened. And I spoke to my wife about it, and I was like, I feel like he's basically saying to us that this has to be our choice. And then when we make a choice, God still is there for you. But some choices aren't right or wrong. They just have to be yours. What's right and or wrong is that it has to be your choice. These are key choices in your life. I've also moved before where it was not my choice. Like my landlord sold their house, and I had to move to the first place that I could afford. And in that case, it's not a free will choice of where you move. It's just you just move. And but in this case, it had to be, we had to choose where we moved. And after we made a decision, it was fascinating because all these other things started happening till like that had been held up. And so, like I've said before on here, we maneuver in space, God maneuvers in time. We maneuver in space, God maneuvers in time. He times things, and we make choices. And so the reason why this is so important to understand is because choice is, especially fundamental choice in the context of sentient cosmos, a periodic, the periodicity of sentience that is the cosmos. In that context, choice is the definer of sovereignty. means I can make a choice and my cell could make a different choice. Then you get cancer or sleeping or something like that. You trying to stay awake, your cells, need to sleep though, and eventually you just pass out. Or you you want to make a choice, but your friend is a different person and he can make his own choices, and you can't choose for your friend. And same thing with even a marriage. It's like I can make a choice, my wife can make a choice, but at the same time also our family as a unit, the incentives that guide our family are one, as a singular entity that is our marriage, and that is our family. It is unified in its fate, and so that's what makes it kind of the fact that it's part of the hierarchy, the periodic hierarchy of sentience, of nested sentient beings, that makes it more of a fundamental relationship or oneness than like being part of a company. Because if a company disappears, like it doesn't wreck the course of your life necessarily. I mean, unless you chose to organize the entire course of your life around a single company, in which case that's a little bit of a different scenario, but most people don't do that, and you probably shouldn't. It's probably idol worship if you do that. But, when I first got married, like minutes after we got married, we went to go take photos in the street, my wife and I. And as we're taking photos, it was not a busy road. It was out in the country of, like Temecula area. And every now and then a car would go by and we'd have to go to the side of the road. And I realized I was very, very focused on my wife's safety, more so than normal, even though I was always focused on her safety even before we were married. And I thought about why. I was like, why am I feeling this? And I realized, and by the way, this is my wedding, so the most important people in my life are here for the most part. My family, immediate family, extended family, best friends. If any of them died and got hit by a car that day, and by the way, like I was a wedding photographer, and this, I'm not laughing at this is like a horrible tragedy, but there was a bunch of rains here a few years before my wedding, but while I was a wedding photographer, and somebody that I knew was a videographer for a wedding here, and it was all over the news, but a tree fell because it was so eroded, and after the rains during the wedding, and killed the bride's mother, and it was like a horrible thing. And so because of that, I was like thinking about just like tragedies at weddings a little bit at the time. And if that had happened if that happens to you, it doesn't actually alter the course of your life, of your plans, not intrinsically. But if it happens to your spouse right after you get married, your entire life now has to completely change. Like all these plans that you made that are permanent for the rest of your life now are out the window. Versus if it's your parents, it's just a horrible, horrible tragedy. But it's not just that. If it's your spouse that you just married, it's like that changes your entire life. And you should think about divorce a little bit differently. It's like it is a complete destruction of a life path. That doesn't mean that it's not ever the right decision. There are certain circumstances I do believe divorce is the right decision, but it's like super limited. It's not just because you don't get along right now. A lifetime is a long time. I know people who did not get along for years, a couple of years, maybe even a little bit more if they really were struggling, and then they got past it, and then it's been like 10 years since then, and they're very happily married again, and they've been married for 40 years or something. So you're not always going to like your spouse. It's not a reason to get divorced. And I say that because of the prevalence of divorce in society, not because of anything to do with my marriage. my wife, again, amazing. But we will do another stream at some point, probably later later this year together. We did one or two. We did one on Valentine's Day last year, but this what choice is: free will, freedom of will, which is the desire to do, the individual desire to do, is what is the definer of sovereignty. It's what makes me different from you, and you different from me, and me different from God, and my wife different from my daughter. It is the definer of sovereignty. There's no such thing as sovereignty without choice. And if there's no such thing as sovereignty, and which means there's no such thing as distinctiveness between two individuals, there's no such thing as meaning anymore. Because meaning is dependent upon your ability to impact others. Meaning is having true meaning is the ability to have a fundamental impact on the world. And if the world is fundamentally sentient being that you're within, you're with the world you're within. I'm not talking about Earth, the rock, but I'm talking about the being that we're within, the cosmos that we're within. That is sentient creation, and then also sentient creation within sentient existence. So, if there is no distinctiveness in your ability to impact others, then there is no meaning to the world. It's like, this is why people, when they are on their deathbed, or when they're asked, before they go out into the world and start working or whatever, and it's like, what do you want to do? It's like, for some people, it's like, I just want to make as much money as possible. But first, a lot of us really like what, and I think that will leave you empty. And the reason why it leaves you empty is because it's not fundamentally valuable. Because what is fundamentally valuable is meaningful fundamentally, and what is meaning fundamentally is your impact on others. This is why I believe God created others, so he could be meaningful. If he was the only one who there was no one else for him to impact, he's meaningless. We can feel meaningless, but we can never be meaningless, because we exist in a world in which multiplicity already exists. We can impact God. Can't, override him if he doesn't want us to, but we can impact him and his feelings, and we can impact each other and each other's feelings, and we can have an impact on ourselves and etc. But especially it is especially apparent that meaning, people feel meaning when they impact others that they perceive as others. We don't usually look at ourselves and be like, those are others. Those are other sentient beings. Those are someones. We look at other humans and we think that, or we look at animals a lot of times and we think that, or we look at God and we think that. And it's much easier for us to see, especially with animals and other humans. And so, people feel meaningful when they impact the lives of others. And other sentient beings. And so this is just kind of my rant on sovereignty a little bit. I'll take some questions from the chat at this point, but I hope that made some sense. Is the new local better wildlife wise? I mean, there's wildlife everywhere. I love wildlife, and for those who don't know, and I have helped study wildlife, and that's how I got started in photography, was wildlife photography, and so I have a background kind of in biology, studying biology in college. So but yeah, Torin, message me on Discord. 1 in every 300,000 mammal births is female a self-clone, mostly without any awareness of the occurrence. That might be true. I don't know. I know that that's true in um, a lot of other types of animals, like fish and reptiles and things. Parthenogenic mammal. Let me see. There are no known cases of naturally occurring mammalian parthenogenesis in the wild. Parthenogenic progeny of mammals would have two X chromosomes and would therefore be genetically female always. Almost always. At least. But, maybe there was one. I don't know. But I'm Church of God Christian, and we don't eat pork and keep the holy days also. That is cool. It's do the people in Church of God Christianity, do they consider themselves Israelite and that's why they do it, or they just think that they should be keeping those things? But that is very cool. I didn't always do any kind of kosher practices or celebrate any kind of holidays, but I now do, and I believe the Abrahamic scriptures are true. I mean, I believe more than just the Abrahamic scriptures are true, but I only study really the Abrahamic scriptures. I don't really study Eastern traditions, even though it's apparent to me that like Hinduism and Buddhism and like Sikhism, and these are not false faiths. I just don't study them that much. Sikhism a little bit. It's very cool. I appreciate Sikhism. It's a religion that requires you to carry a weapon for self-defense. It's like, I very much align with that. That's a funny coincidence. I've been thinking I actually want more bacon lately. That's fine. I've had bacon with breakfast and lunch today. It's very common. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong either. I don't think I should be eating it, but that doesn't mean that I have the same obligations, moral responsibilities about it as you. But there are certain moral responsibilities about eating animals that I think everybody has, but I don't know about pork. Probably, personally, I think that we probably shouldn't be eating pork, but I understand. It's very good. I've eaten lots of bacon in my life. Paulina says, love this topic. Awesome. So I occasionally feel embarrassed looking back at my younger atheist days. Don't, though. I do, I mean, I feel embarrassed looking at last week's stream sometimes, I feel embarrassed looking at this week's stream right after it's over sometimes. So, but you gotta give yourself grace. God gives you grace, so you should, because he's higher than you in the hierarchy. So if you don't give yourself grace, but God does give you grace, then you're kind of like putting yourself above God. But that doesn't mean you don't try and do the right thing. It just means cut yourself a break if you don't sometimes. But choice is the definer of sovereignty, and sovereignty and multiplicity is necessary. Fundamental multiplicity is necessary to meaning. And what is fundamental is sentience. And not just sentience, but sentient beings. And so fundamental meaning is true meaning is how you impact fundamental reality, which is sentient beings. And it's interesting to think about the fact that you can't be meaningless. You have intrinsic value and meaning. That's why you're here. If God's nature is oneness, every single partition of sentience that he does is a choice that he made. Every mosquito, which I hate mosquitoes, every tick, which I hate ticks. And I like almost all animals. I like scorpions, and I like snakes, and I like spiders, even though, some of these things freak me out. But it's funny, I like watch all these like videos of people keeping like spiders and stuff. I don't keep any spiders, But I definitely like watch all these videos of people doing, because it's just interesting and they're amazing creatures. But like, um, but then when you look at a tick or a mosquito and you're like, it's amazing, but it's also like, it's not worth it. I don't think, but God does think it is. So I have to actually assume that it is. Ticks are worth having around for some reason, because he had to choose to create them. Every single partition of sentience was a choice by God. That doesn't mean that evolution doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that selection doesn't exist. That, of course it does. Causality exists. Impact exists. I mean, I'm very aware of that. But on a metaphysical level, the partition of sentience that must, the bit of sentience that must be partitioned away from the whole and put into the structure that is the vessel that allows that sentience to perceive its own sovereignty and make its own choices and maneuver. Now, every single time that happens, it's a choice by God, which means you, and because there's others around for you to impact on levels below you, on levels above you, and you always impact them. You can't not. You can, you are intrinsically meaningful. God is not. God is intrinsically, initially meaningless. Before anyone else existed, God was meaningless. He felt meaningless too, but he was meaningless. God feels something, it's because it's true. God feels meaningless, it's because he is meaningless. But as soon as God created another, he was the most meaningful being in existence. And so now he's the most meaningful being in existence. And every single time that he partitions his sentience and makes another being, he becomes more meaningful. And it also creates more opportunities for us to be more meaningful. The more beings that you positively impact, which means you have to impact, in a good way, and that perpetuates beyond you. And there are certain ways that make it easier to do that. It's not exactly the same for everybody, but there are certain things that are almost this, that are certain things that are consistent and applicable to almost everybody, at least. And then there are probably also specific things that are specific to each one of us, but there are also common things for most people, like getting married. So maximize the amount of impact that you have. You should maximize the time that impact it radiates through others, the lives of others, which means like permanent decisions to be there for another, to commit to another, to have children. It's funny, this guy commented on this post that I saw on Instagram this week, and it was talking about how the birth rate was plummeting. And not everybody's meant to have children, but if you are attracted to the opposite sex, I believe that it is a moral responsibility to get married. And if you get married, then I think it is a moral responsibility to try and have kids. If you don't have a medical reason, why not to? And leave it up to God at that point. But obviously, if there are certain medical considerations and things like that, then that's another thing. But then when you do that, you impact future generations much more easily than if you just try to invent something new that everybody, the telephone or something. But some people do, that is their purpose, is to make something that, I don't know, make a piece of music or a tool that perpetuates, and or to start an organization, or the most impact, the person who has had the most impact in the world today had no children. Nobody in this world has been more impactful, and this doesn't matter if you're an atheist or an anti-theist, really is what it is, or a theist, or a Christian, or Jew, or Muslim, or a Sikh, or a Buddhist. Nobody has more impact on the world today than Jesus, for sure. I mean, that's just the truth. Nobody is more famous, and certainly following him has impacted many people's lives. Whether you think it's for good or for not, it doesn't matter. In the case of what I'm saying is that it's impacted people's lives, and I would say that it has caused people to have a lot of children many times and create families, and which that maximizes your impact. So I would say, I mean, it is probably in general a good thing if it's true, and if you're truly following that for honest reasons, but that the morals that lead you to, and this is true for Abrahamic scriptures in general, and also all religions, is you see them, they all value family, and all the ones that last. It's because, of course, the ones that don't value family, commitment, marriage, making choices to go against your nature sometimes to maximize the good, those things, those religions that aren't like that, they die out. Of course they would. But I saw in this post this week, and somebody was commenting on the lack of that humans are having less children. We're going to be, below replacement rate soon, and kind of just talking about the impact that's going to have on society. It's going to have a huge impact on society. That is not good. A lot of people are going to feel meaningless. They're still not, but it's going to cause a lot of that. And also just, young people are needed to support older people. You can't just have tech do it. You can think that you can, but you really can't. But they said, somebody went by, based, a specific city, and that I'm not going to say because I don't want people looking up this, I'm not doxing this person, but they based someplace was their based city was their Instagram handle, and they were like, who would bring children into this dumpster fire? And that's such a self-defeating idea. It's so meaningless, and just nonsensical of a perspective to take, because if you one brings people into this because you don't want their lives to be impacted negatively, then impacting the lives of others is a fundamental value. And so actually, you can't actually, you're minimizing that by choosing not to have kids just because it's the world is tough. Guys, the world has always been tough. Since Adam and Eve bit that apple, the world has been tough. And it was tough before that. It was tough before we had civilization, and it's been tough afterwards, and for different reasons. It's very unlikely in society today that you're going to die from an infected scratch. It's also very unlikely that you're going to get eaten by a large predator. Used to be a lot more likely before civilization, but at the same time, it's very easy to see meaning probably before civilization. Now it's a lot more difficult because our instincts are out of alignment with our environment, and the fact that we can pursue the things that we want to do, and the consequences aren't as apparent, makes choice harder to actually have, in some ways, because you're a slave to your own nature. But prior to civilization, choice was probably also much less, I don't want to say harder for choice to be made, for us to make choices. And I don't want to say it's harder now to make choices either, but what I'm saying is that it might be harder now to make choices, but it's definitely less opportunities for choices before civilization. There were opportunities, but there were less of them probably, because the world is in alignment with your instincts for the most part. And then there's also the case, though, here that it's more difficult. There's not more difficult. There's less opportunities for true choices in many people's lives, because our technology allows for us to it clouds us from the consequences of our choices, and because it delays the impact that they have on us as individuals, but it doesn't actually get rid of the consequences. And it's very interesting. But good night. Glad to catch this. For me, atheism was part of the process, like an existential crisis. Exactly. I don't feel like my days of being an anti-theist. I called myself an atheist, but I was an anti-theist. I disbelieved in existence as a sentient being. I thought I don't have many regrets from it, because I did what I thought was right for the most part, and I was honest about it, and as much as fairly often I tried to be, at least. Not perfect, but I'm usually kind of honest, more so than maybe most people. Maybe that's not true. I don't know. But I'm kind of also just bad at lying. So like I'm just a bit like autistic that way or something. But so I don't know if that's something I could take credit for. But you got to just look back and be like, I did what I thought was what I should be doing. And the thing is I don't believe that we're judged for doing. I don't believe that we're fundamentally judged. Meaning like after you pass away and you see all the choices that you made in your life, which is what I think basically happens. And the impact that choice had, because you basically would get a big picture view. You'd get taken out of your own, this body that limits you, and you'd get a big picture view, and all of a sudden you'd see the impact of every negative decision that you make, and the people that it hurt, and the people that then those hurt people hurt, and those hurt people hurt, and just et cetera, and all throughout the entire system of the cosmos. And also the good, though, you would see every good decision that you made, the impact that had on this person, which then impacted this person, and this person, and this person, and this person. You'd see it all at once. Going back to the very beginning of multiplicity. And that is like extreme bliss, and also like extraordinary like shame, and you'd feel very judged of yourself too, but just feel like it's logically inevitable that we are shown the consequences of our choices after we pass. But also, if you weren't aware of a choice, really, of a specific choice, then you're not going to be really judged for it. I don't believe. You wouldn't judge yourself for it either, in that circumstance where you got a God's eye view of everything. But this is the important context, is sentience. And so to wrap it up a little bit about and get to Terrence Howard a tiny bit, because I just wanted to reference it, because he said something interesting, and we'll look at it. But I started listening to the entire interview that he had, by the way. We'll talk more about it at some point if I see things that I really want to bring up in the actual interview, because I really just commented on the reaction of the academic world and just the public at large to him going on there, and also just like a couple things that he had said that I had seen in clips. And I talked about like how language is super important, to us understanding each other, because it gives us the context, which is the information itself. So, but I started listening to the original, and it is interesting. Like I said in the last stream, it's very clear to me that he sees something that's true. That said, that doesn't mean I think he's right about everything, because nobody's right about everything, and I definitely think that there are some things I disagree with him on. But one of the things that I want to kind of mention is, and I don't know his perspective entirely yet because I haven't listened to this all the way through. I don't know if he would agree that existence is a sentient being, which is what God is. God is the initial and all-encompassing and eternal self-referential existence, which is a someone, which is a sentient being. It's a sentient someone that's self-aware, makes choices, has their own freedom of will, which is their own sovereignty. God is, it's funny because God is the most constrained being that exists and also the most sovereign being that exists, because no one else can override his will, but also because he is existence itself, he can only make others within him, and because he is also he's super aware of existence, because it is all him or within him, all at once. He's aware of it all. He, like I said, if you're aware of it all, then it's much, the opportunities for choices are less apparent, because you're just like, well, I'm going to do what's right. But I'm not going to say the opportunities for choices means that the right choice is much more obvious, which makes it so that it's like, in some ways, for us at least, it's like, why not just do that? But especially if it is in alignment with your nature. But the thing is that a lot of times the right choice in our civilized society today, I don't want to say civilized society, in our technological civilization, in human civilization, the right choice is not very obvious. And if it is, then it's oftentimes also against our nature. But because of our instincts being out of alignment with our environment. But that's not. With God, it's different, because he is aware of what he needs to do to be meaningful, and to maximize meaning, but he also has to go against his nature every time he does that. So it's like he is simultaneously the most constrained and also the most sovereign being, because your cells can be like, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to reproduce myself and not do my job anymore, and I'm just going to become a tumor. Me and all my offspring are just going to keep to ourselves and do what we want and just reproduce forever and try and live forever, versus trying to just contribute to the whole and recognize that I'm part of a system that we want to keep going, not a system of sentience, not just me, myself, and my own. And so, that's metastatic mentality. It's a good, what's that called when it's two words that start with the same letter? Commented in the chat if you know. I knew this, an alliteration. So metastatic mentality. Eric Weinstein called the political manifestation of trying to be everyone's mom, metastatic maternity. It's like trying to be the mom of everyone, even people on the other side of the world that you don't know, and that you don't have any right to be their mom, and violate their sovereignty. But the thing is that if your cells do that and go metastatic and go cancerous, they're ultimately going to kill you, and then they're dead too. They're either really, really evil, intentionally, or they are not aware of the consequences of their actions, which is that they're minimizing their meaning. They're minimizing the impact that they could have by burning it out, essentially, and destroying the system that they actually rely on to transcend their own the impact, their own individual immediate impact around them, so they can fundamentally transcend into others, outside of themselves. So they're just ignorant. We are like that with many things, and it produces a metastatic mentality always. It's this is why it's important to treat others the way that you would want your own and yourself to be treated as much as possible, because that otherwise you're not viewing. It's the easiest way to get in alignment with the whole, and to also perceive things from like the viewpoint of the whole, instead of trying to just be like, well, I want to do XYZ. And there's so many things I want to bring up in terms of this, but I don't know if I'm going to right now. But the point is that if impact is fundamentally impacting others, sentience, because sentience is fundamental, any worldview that doesn't place this at the heart of it is limited. At least it's not fundamentally true, and it is limited to a specific context, not the context of all other contexts, which is sentience. And I bring this up because of Terrence Howard, and I don't know if he believes God, to bring this back, but he said something interesting.
Yeah.
It does seem like he doesn't believe in the Abrahamic scriptures, and that's it is. I will say that I feel like at a certain point of understanding, you would see Eastern and Western traditions that have persisted throughout many lineages as having fundamental truths there, and that they eventually, maybe you perceive that they all have a unique purpose and message to bring, but a lot of people they're like, this is my religion, everything else is false. It's like, I'm Amish and everyone else is wrong. I'm Catholic and everyone else is wrong. I'm Hasidic Jewish and everyone else is wrong. I'm Sikh and everyone else is wrong. I'm Scientologist and everybody else is wrong. That's I would say not true. I mean, I would say Scientology, not to rip on it, I don't know that much about it. I'm sure that there's some individual value to it. I've heard that it has helped individuals with their own lives. But the difference is that it doesn't seem to have manifest the same generational lineage-based structures of the nuclear family being at its core, and that means it's not on the same fundamental level as the other theological traditions that do place the nuclear family as a core value. Doesn't seem like Scientology does that, but I don't know, which makes me think it's not the same thing as a theological tradition. It's just maybe I don't want to call it a cult because I don't know what that even really means, but it's maybe that's what cult should be, if it's something that doesn't, it's like it appears like a religion but it burns out in it because it doesn't place the nuclear family as a core value. So it's not fundamentally aligned with God. That doesn't mean it's useless. Some people, I'm sure, have found value in certain practices and things in Scientology, but I would say probably if in any group that is appears to be a religion that burns itself out in a generation or two because of its lack of fundamental values, or its kind of worship of something that is self extinguishing, then the good things about that thing are probably also found in other communities, I would say. But I don't know. I'm not here to rip on anything that I'm not a part of necessarily, or anything that I don't truly understand that well. But it does appear that certain groups of certain traditions have common values, certain traditions do not. Those ones that have common values that are aligned with at least like the nuclear family, marriage, commitment, modesty, etc. Tradition, those things are those traditions persist, and because they are motivating of structures and actions that maximize meaning, and persist, and resist entropy, versus like something that's like individually focused. But Terrence Howard was talking about he said that the Abrahamic scriptures appear to be not true, and they don't make sense. And I understand some of the arguments he made, and we'll talk more about them maybe another time. But one of the things that he said, though, that was interesting is, and I was kind of expecting this because it's very common from like the quote unquote New Age community. And I don't want to, I'm just saying that because everybody knows what I mean. There's like such a value based on geometry. Like curved lines are the reason that things succeed, and straight lines are the reason that they don't, or that, and I heard him say that, or that, everything is based on frequency and balance, and that is what the world fundamentally is that it's, it's fundamentally balance, it's fundamentally frequency. But the thing is that it's the same mistake. You're not saying anything when you say that. I don't think anything actually makes sense to say the world is fundamentally anything other than sentience, sentient being, or sentient beings. I think everything else is wrong. But I think because everything else is wrong, nothing else makes sense if you actually contextualize it properly. But I did see him say some stuff about, how, somebody took put straight lines in their work and excluded, curved lines for the sake of the church, and that maybe that's true. I don't know, but that was a distinguishing thing. That is what is the distinguisher of truth. And I will say this is like, if you watch my old video, which I will link below, it's called Space-Time and the Observerse, I believe, something like that. I talk about how the existence is this structure, which is a sentient being that is spinning in on itself because it's referencing itself at the center of its movement. So it's just, it's just doing this. This is what you do. Metaphysically, you are just spinning around yourself. And this does create, like all kinds of curved spiral geometries and things like that. And let's look at something very interesting. So just to show this, just to give Terrence Howard a little bit of like credit here too, that this idea that, circular spinning spiral is more fundamental than like a straight line potentially. It's not more fundamental. A straight line on a metaphysical level is like goals. It's like we have a goal over there. But the world that we have to navigate in order to get from here to our goal is circular, because we're within another being that's going, looking, perceiving itself, so it's spinning, and so this is causing just a vortex of ether, but I don't want to say that because what does that even mean? It's just it could mean something true within the context of sentience. It's like the metaphysical fluidity of existence is the ether, but it is not fundamental. It's actually still an illusion or perception that it's like a fluid because of the context of sentient beings interacting and moving. So the world is moving, and so it's like fluid, but it's not fundamentally ether. What is ether? It's the apparent metaphysical fluidity of existence, but it is caused by the interaction and nestedness of sentient beings and hierarchies. But he was just saying all these things about, like, the truth basically is, it's this geometry, or the truth is frequency, and you see this all the time. Nikola Tesla said this. Well, actually, I have two things that I have to say. It's funny because I ask people to let me know in the comments where you think would make a good clip. One of the problems is that I think in this like circuitous fashion, but at first I think about it as like linear. I'm like, okay, I want to make that point, but then I start making that point, and then I'm like, oh, it's related to this and this and this and this and this and this, and then everybody's forgotten the point that I was even originally trying to make. Sometimes even me, and then all of a sudden, like, I make it, and it's in a clip setting. It doesn't really work. But if you think that any parts of this would make a good clip, please put their timestamps in the comments below. Would be very helpful. I will turn it into a clip if you do that. So Nikola Tesla said, and everybody in the New Age community talks about this all the time, that if you like 3, 6, and 9 is the secret to the universe, or if you understand that, then you understand the secrets of the universe. And I remember when I first created this model of the quantum of consciousness that I talked about in the last stream. I saw this 3, 6, and 9. I was like, dang. And then I was like, I saw 432, and like these are all numbers, and I saw 33. These are all numbers that especially people in like occult New Age communities talk about. And I'm not like a super numerology person or anything, but I saw them. And I was like, that's interesting. And 19, this is sums to 19. 19 is like a number that is very it's discussed relating to the Quran and things like that. I don't know what they think it means, but I know that it's considered relevant. But what's interesting is when you hear him talk about like spiral. I want to show you something. Look at this spinning sequence of numbers. The Fibonacci sequence. You notice I said spinning sequence. Here's a sequence that I just made I was just like, it just is building off of other sequences and that I was just putting in, and we'll talk maybe about it another time. But what's interesting about this is that you can see, if I move it especially, that this is just an equation, guys. I didn't do this. Like, this is as true for this Fibonacci sequence, any sequence. This is true of any sequence in numbers. It's just very easy to see in this one because in the context of Excel, there's zeros and on both sides isolating the numbers. So actually this isn't the exact number. There would probably be other numbers here, but Excel is limited in how many decimal places it can go. But what this does is it creates an effect that shows us this column of values. And what's interesting is that when I move this, especially, you can see there are strings spiraling in the number sequence. This is true in any number sequence, but it is easy to see in this one. That shows that something that he's saying about spinning curved lines, whatever, there's something metaphysical, metamathematically true about what he's talking about with that, people call it sacred geometry, but that metageometry, or I guess you could just call it sacred geometry, but it's really the geometry of sentient relationships. So Tesla said, think of things in terms of, what was it? Frequency, and this is like a mantra, basically. I don't even know what a mantra means, but it is like a very repeated phrase in the New Age type of community. Is Tesla, think of world in terms of frequency, vibration. If you want to understand the world, conceit and vibration. That's what Tesla said, apparently. Let's think about that. What is frequency definition? It's, the rate at which something occurs or is repeated over a particular period of time or given a sample. The rate at which vibration occurs. Okay. What is vibration then? So it's like the rate of vibration. The oscillation. It's like frequency versus vibration in physics refers to the oscillations in the periodic back and forth motion of the particles, body, or medium. In contrast, frequency refers to the numbers of changes, periods, or vibrations in a unit of time. And then frequency, vibration, and energy. I feel like that there's deep wisdom to that. We'll probably deconstruct it on another stream some other time. I'm going to think about it first before we do a stream about it. But what is even easier and more fundamental is, I would say, if you want to understand the world, consider it in terms of inside, outside, separate, and oneness in the context of sentient beings, or consider it in terms of sentience. That's what I would say. That is how you truly understand the world. How you navigate the world, I would say, is in terms of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. But I would say, if you want to truly understand the world, more fundamentally than frequency and vibration and energy, more fundamentally than inside, outside, separate, and oneness, more fundamentally than matter or computation or strings. Strings of what? It's interesting because when you see this, like column of twisted, spiraled strings of what? Strings of information. It's just woven into the numbers, which means it's woven into logic. There's like a spiral of logic around us that we can perceive in numbers. I mean, it's obvious, but I would say that it's not like, when I first started this work, I did, and I talked about this before, but I had like a theophany at a certain point that was like, it was like a sober DMT trip, and I'm not going to get too into it, but I was sober at the time that it happened. I was just in the shower washing my hair, and I was thinking about the cosmos. But I saw like the cosmos, the way that I had pictured, had like logically thought it would have to inevitably be like. And after I had that experience, I made this. It's the background of my computer and my phone and basically everything. Made this piece of art. I'm not very artistic. Other than photography, I don't make art. before this, but I felt compelled. I made this on the computer in like I think it was Adobe Illustrator, to show kind of like geometrically or abstractly like what I saw. And because I couldn't paint everything that I saw, it was like nested worlds and separated by tech and and periods of sentience, and going through molecules and cells and tech and organisms and then tech and then back through another universe. It was just too much that you could ever paint, so I just made this. And it has like the flower of life in it and the Star of David built into it. And I didn't do that on purpose. I tried to build inevitable fill the space with inevitable geometry, like geometric symmetry. That's all I tried to do. And it just inevitably does that. You end up making that. That's why these sacred geometric symbols like flower of life that Terrence Howard talks about and the Star of David, they're the same symbol, by the way. So when they're talking about like straight lines are not it, they're not fundamental, but then curved lines are, none of that's fundamental. This is about the dimensions of sentience and also the relationships between various sentient beings that cause these inevitable geometric patterns in the metaphysical relationships of sentience. But it's not, and logic, which is the same thing. And you look here, but for instance, let's do this just to show what I'm talking about. How can I do this? Like this. Actually, I just have it on my phone. It's kind of gonna look at this. There. That's the same. That is the same shape viewed from two different perspectives. It's the same structure. I will say that, viewed from two different perspectives. There is no, oh, straight lines are true or false, and curved lines are true or false. No, sentience is fundamental, and geometries arise from relationships. And but I'm not saying there isn't value in studying quote unquote sacred geometry. I don't like intentionally. I can see it, like that's how I made that thing, but like I didn't even know it was called that until like way after I made that, piece of art. But everybody makes the same thing. But it's funny because I remember telling my friend, I was like, dude, I had like a sober theophany that was like a DMT trip once. So he was telling me how DMT was amazing. And I was like, yeah, I used to want to try it because it seemed like everybody was saying the same thing, but like I couldn't understand what they were saying. So in college, I was like, one drug that I would like to try one day. And I've never tried it, and I won't. But I told them, I was like, yeah, I had this like experience once that was like that, but it was sober, and so I no longer feel the need to ever do DMT. He was like, dude, there's no way you could have that experience while sober. And I was like, oh yeah, well, I made this piece of art, and I like showed him the piece of art, and he was like, dang, dude, you like had a DMT trip while sober. And because there's no denying it, DMT, I feel like it breaks. It seems like it, and I've never done it, and I don't advise people to do it. I actually don't think it gives you any kind of enlightenment, but people feel enlightened afterwards, which is really brings me back to like one of my original points is like, in order to make a true choice, you have to know that it's worse to feel like you know everything if you don't, and you can't know everything because you're not God. But DMT gives you like the thought that you do, I feel like, because there's no hierarchy associated with getting a peek behind the curtain of our physically perceived world, which is what I think DMT basically does. It gives you a peek behind the curtain of that, but it doesn't actually show you what's really going on. It's like you're the passenger in a car or in an airplane, and so and then all of a sudden you peel the panels away and you can see all the like turbines and wiring and all this stuff, but then and you feel like now you know what the airplane is. But like, imagine if that airplane wasn't actually an airplane that was like a machine alone. It was like a sentient being. It was like a bird. It's like being inside of a bird or riding on the back of a bird and like peeking inside the bird and seeing all the muscles and veins and things like that, and then being like, I know what the bird is. It's all frequency and energy and veins and muscles and but that's not what the bird really is. The bird really is, it's a sentient being. And but I'm gonna watch more of Terrence Howard's interview. I think it's still valuable things that we can learn from him. I do think he's onto something. That doesn't mean I agree with him on even most of what he's saying, or I definitely not in how he's saying it, but I mean it's pretty obvious to me that he's not crazy. It's very hard, to see something like kind of get a glimpse of the metaphysical and then not feel like now, because you do know something that others don't. You do see something that others don't, but that doesn't mean it's the end. And you can't ever see everything until after you pass, and you don't even know if you can then. You certainly will see whatever it is that you need to see at that point. But I do think that the end point is sentience. There's nothing, it's God. God is the beginning and the end of existence, is his sentience. And it's the beginning and the end of yours. If yours even ends, but it's certainly the destiny of it, even if it's you do persist, which I do believe most people persist after they die, as a self-aware being, just not able to change anymore, but as a being super aware and also not able to maneuver anymore, make choices that have impacts. But to be aware, it's like you're now just like stuck being an observer. But in a good way for the most part. But yeah, I think that I was gonna look at a clip of Terrence Howard one more time, but I don't know if it's like
was not the true God of the universe. It was much larger than that. Their story went back 1,000 years. And there's other traditions and tribes around the world where their stories go back 200,000 years. And they made a lot more sense. So how have we limited ourselves? You take Noah having 3 sons, Shem, Japheth, and Ham, and one was black, one was Asian, and one was white. Does that make sense to you? But we subscribe to that. We subscribe to that dogma, and everybody's entitled to whatever opinion they want to have. I don't think that opinion is right.
We're going off in so many different directions. But I do want to talk about this. Okay. I do want to get to this because I would love to know your what you believe happened. But the Neil deGrasse Tyson thing is so confusing to me. That he was critical of Tesla.
He was critical of Tesla. He was critical of Walter Russell, and he was critical of John Keely.
This is not his field of study, though, right?
No, he's astrophysicist. He's an astrophysicist. But Walter Russell talked about that Walter Russell talked about the fact that the sun gave birth to the Earth, that it didn't coalesce from some field, and the proof of this. Do you guys know that the Earth is drifting away from the sun?
Yeah, slightly.
This is a mistake I made at the Oxford because they wouldn't allow me to bring my notes or anything. So I said the drift was 6 inches a year. It's 0.6 inches a year. So if you add up how long it would take the Earth to move, because in all of the planets in every solar system is drifting away from their primary at the same exact rate, like 1.5 centimeters. So this is a universal expansion that's happening with everything moving away. So them saying the Webb telescope had proven that those galaxies couldn't have formed 13, 14 billion years ago. But if you would just add up linearly how long it would take the Earth to go from the sun to 93 million miles away, it's 9 trillion. Hold on.
Let's go.
I did all of the little calculations. Man, don't turn my phone off. Don't do that. Every time I get ready, well, because I know they're watching me right now, and they're mad at me.
Who's they?
The people that want that, our entire world economy is based off of the politicians and the.
I want to say this real quick. This is going to either make me sound crazy or not, or make him sound less crazy. I don't know. But it doesn't matter. I'm just going to be honest. There are weird things that happen with technology when you are discussing certain topics. And I actually don't chop it up to the same, like that it's like the government or like the, I don't know, whoever, the deep state, like watching you. I'm not saying they're not. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that that's the only reason why your phone acts up during certain moments. But there are just certain things that happen with certain topics and certain things. And I've noticed that with tech. And it's almost like, we can see, because it's energetic, we're perceiving like a system of energy transfer. And it probably happens all the time outside of tech too, but it's just like really obvious in tech when like things don't, or where you notice a pattern where it's like, every time I bring this up, my phone goes out. It's like, it's probably actually, I actually don't think that it's likely that it's a conspiracy of people against you. I think that it's more likely that it's like there's some type of interaction happening between the topic, the string of information that you are, and the topic that you're discussing, versus like some string of information within technology. Because the system as a whole, like it's all interconnected. And information transcends technology and physical systems. And it transcends time, and strings of metaphysical information are everywhere. They transcend logic. Like I said, you can't deny that there is a spiral of information shown in numbers themselves. It's like, you don't think that trickles up. So there is something odd sometimes with the tech, but I don't think that it's usually actually. I think it actually happens all the time with all kinds of physical systems that we interact with too. We just don't notice. We don't think of it as like a conspiracy. It's like when you're in a rush, you hit every red light. When you're like in a pissed off mood, you're like, always hit every red light. And I don't think it's just because you just notice it. I think there is actually like something about that moment sometimes where like you're out of alignment with the coherence, and you're out of the flow. You're going up against the stream of information, and so like you'll hit every red light. And we don't sit there and be like, oh man, deep state and politicians and people, they're all just trying to make me late for work. You're just like, you're either think God is just punishing you or messing with you, or you think that it's just a horrible coincidence that's meaningless. It's probably neither in most cases. It's probably you're out of alignment with the world, and so like you're hitting up against that. It's also like when you're really mad, like you hit your head or like you bang your knee or something, even after you're pissed already. It's like it seems like the world hits you back a little bit sometimes when you're really angry and or being selfish or something like that. That happens. I feel like that happens to me sometimes. I think most people have that experience where it feels like just the world is just hitting you back. And I think that it's in tech, it's very easy when that happens to be like, oh, it's them. They're listening. It's like, maybe they are, but that's not even probably the main reason why weird things are happening with the tech. It's probably just that in tech, we know that other people can access it. So we assume that it's other people that's causing the decoherence. But in physical systems, we don't think that like somebody hacked your wall to make it an inch closer to you so that you bang your head or stub your toe just when you're out of alignment, or you don't think that anybody's going to just make you hit every red light every time you're pissed and stressed out. It's like, no, you're part of that system. You're like out of alignment, and that happens in tech too, and it happens in physical systems constantly. But you just don't think about it as being under as physical systems. When you don't think about your wall and the traffic lights, even, which, you know, that's kind of digital, but it's not wireless. You don't think about that as being, I mean, I don't know if it's wireless, but you don't think about it as like the same as your phone or your laptop. But you don't think about that as being under the control of other people. Whereas like we do think about that with our computers and phones, because it is more under the control of others. But I don't think he's crazy for noticing that his phone has weird moments in certain repeated circumstances where it's like, oh man, system's against me. Or you're against the system in that moment, actually. Probably it's more likely that. And I've had that experience, but it's not crazy to notice it. Everybody does it, like notices it with traffic lights and with you know, hurting yourself when you're pissed off. And you'll chalk it up and be like, yeah, no, you just notice it then. No, but you notice it. That's the thing. But my daughter is, my wife just got home. My daughter is crying. And because this is way past her bedtime. So I am going to call it. But I will just say, Terrence Howard's not crazy for noticing patterns in his phone. It's probably also not, usually at least, the, deep state. And, but, they might be watching him. Some people. And they do watch people. There are people with power in tech that watch people. That is a fact. And but I think it's most likely that when I see these things happen too, it's like the same topic, same conversation. It's usually when it's kind of out of alignment. It's like maybe I shouldn't have said that, or like I'm not describing it, the way that I should have, or not telling it to the right person. It's like you all of a sudden tech's against you. But I think that it's just you notice it everywhere, but you're assuming in the instance of the tech that it's due to somebody's intentional, spying on you or something. It's probably not. But maybe in some instances it probably is. But it's, for most people, most of the time, probably not. Buzz. Watch it. It's going to bite you. Thank you for this argument's ideas about having kids. Coincidentally, I've been thinking about this as well. Well, always happy to answer any questions about it. Hello, Tyler. Thank you for your work. I've been very interested in the past weeks. Will you also be answering a couple questions after the stream? I live in Amsterdam and missed most of it. You could have asked me questions in the stream. Ask me quickly, because then I am wrapping it up. But you can ask it in the chat now, and I will try and answer it. I will say this. Somebody made this video, and I don't know who they are. This is the last thing that I want to mention. Somebody made this. Tyler Goldstein's Theory of Every0ne, Sentient Singularity. The channel is artificially aware. I'll post this into the description below. I don't know who this is. I don't know if you're watching now, but this was very well done. This video summarizing my work is very good, and I highly recommend everybody check it out. Subscribe to Artificially Aware. I did, and if the other videos that he makes are as good as this one, then it's definitely a channel worth watching. This was a very accurate description of my work. I'm actually like amazed that I don't know who you are, and you did such a great job on that. So thank you for that, and for doing it well. And thank you to anybody who checks it out. Also, thank you to people who checked out the stream tonight. Share this if you found it valuable. Like this video if you haven't yet. Please subscribe to the channel, and comment any questions you have down below, and I will try and answer them. Also, we do have a Discord. We have weekly calls in there where we talk as a group, voice calls. They're open topic. It's a very good group. If you would like to join our Discord, private message me on Theory of Every0ne Instagram, and I will send you the link to our Discord. It's a very good, small community, but a very good one. And I always appreciate those discussions. Don't know if there will not be a call next week on the Discord because I'm moving, and there won't be a stream again next week on this channel because, again, I'm moving. But we will pick it up again as soon as I'm done moving. So thanks again, everyone. There are 15 people watching and only 10 likes. I hate to be a shill for myself, but it really does help, and I appreciate every single like. And also view. If you don't like it, that's fine. You don't have to like it. You can comment down below and tell me that you don't like it, and I would appreciate if you explained why. I will read it, but also just thanks for watching. I will maybe post a clip next week. If you see any parts of this or any other stream that you think would make a good clip, post a timestamp and say this would be a great clip in the comments of any of my videos, and I will clip it. I do need help with that. I don't have the time, and I'm not very good at that, and I'd rather the clips be things that you guys found valuable than just me. My streams are already what I find valuable. The clips should be what you guys find valuable. But with that, thank you, everyone, and peace.